Douglas Jardine of England and captain during the Bodyline series has always fascinated me for two reasons. I think he was a really smart captain. I mean, if you want to encapsulate what Test cricket is all about, just look at what Jardine did.
A definition of cricket which has always struck me as being the only worthy definition of cricket. It was described as this by a New Zealander when he said it was that beautiful, beautiful game that is battle and service and sport and art.
Most uncompromising. There was nothing that was going to deter him. Carrying out right to the end, I would imagine.
My father was born in India, where his father was a judge in Bombay, and from a small boy, he was sent across to the UK for his education, first at Horace Hill Prep School, and then at Winchester, and then on to Oxford. And in all that time, he only would get back to India to his parents once a year in the long summer holidays.
These public schools were set up to educate young men to go out and run the empire. And he was very much a product of that system.
The weight of the British Empire's expectations fell on his shoulders. Fortunately, they were very willing shoulders.
A lot of people felt when Douglas Jardine was appointed that he was an absolutely implacable man. They feared that there might be trouble because he hadn't got on well with the Australians when he had gone with Percy Chapman's side in 28-9. And he didn't like them much, and they didn't like him much. And Rockley Wilson, who had been to Australia just before as a member of the MCC side, who was his coach and master at Winchester, spoke with a rather strange way of fingering his tie. And he said, well, he said, on hearing that he was to be captain, he said, we shall win the Ashes, but we may lose a Dominion.
The opposing player who was devastating all the opposition was Don Bradman. Bradman at that stage had an average of around about 100. So what Jardine decided to do was, right, the champion player in the opposition side, I'm going to try and cut his average down.
He was thought to have flinched when facing Harold Larwood. Well, he went on to score 230 odd, so he obviously wasn't struggling too much. But Jardine got a film of this innings, and at the moment when Bradman flinched, Jardine is supposed to have said, that's it, he's yellow.
Jardine called his plan fast leg theory, but the cricket world would later come to know it as bodyline. It involved a fast bowler bowling short rising deliveries at the batsman, pitching the ball on the line of the leg stump. 6 fieldsmen would be placed in a leg trap, waiting to take a catch from an unsuccessful defensive stroke or a mistimed hook shot. Should the batsman be successful in hooking the rising delivery over the waiting leg trap, 2 fieldsmen were placed in the outfield on the boundary.
Oh yes, since we were in Australia, it's very nice to be here again, and pleasant to find that despite the depression, big cities haven't changed very much.
Jardine, wearing the Harlequin cap to which the Australian crowd objected, opens the batting with Hammond, who soon gets going. He is once more likely to be a thorn in Australia's side.
Jardine soon found himself the target of incessant barracking from the vocal Australian crowds. His habit of batting in a Harlequin cap raised the ire of many of the working class spectators.
Harlequin is something, it's an Oxford University club, and all blues, and those who are near to the Oxford side are made Harlequins. And it's a famous club, goes back many years. And of course it's a colourful, beautiful cap.
I'm sure my father did irritate them, and he irritated them in other ways by wearing his Harlequin cap and that sort of thing. And I think that he did that as much to make himself believe that he was going to succeed. I think it was to steel himself to cope.
The Harlequin cap, of course, was a lovely reminder of the elitist status of those who'd come from the right university. And again, it may have been a little bit this business of just reminding the natives that one had come from a certain status, one was of officer caste, and one was not going to be torn down by the crude and uncouth barracking of these people who insisted on shouting rude things at one.
The barracking got more and more personal. as the tour progressed, and it really did get to him. At Sydney, he played an innings which Bradman has described, no less, as one of the best displays of stroke play that he'd ever seen. Jardine scored about 140, big 100, and he was barracked a lot. And as he came into the dressing room, I was told this by someone who was in the dressing room, and Patsy Hendren was going out to bat, and Hendren said to Jardine, they don't seem to like you over here, Mr. Jardine. Jardine said, it is fucking mutual.
The Australians are great fighters, as they showed last night, and never beaten till the last ball of the last test match was bowled.
My father enjoyed the sort of repartee, and he told us of an occasion at a test match in Sydney, when on a very hot day, fielding in the outfield and trying to flit away the flies that were all round him because it was so hot, and some wag in the crowd behind him saying to him, "You leave our bloody flies alone."
On the way out, on the Orontes, he summoned his team, and he announced that Don Bradman, from here on in, will not be called Don Bradman, or Don, or Bradman. He'll be called the Little Bastard.
Jardine would say, we have to hate them. That's the only way we're going to beat them.
After Woodford hit on the heart, Jardine first of all turned round to Larwood and said very loudly, "Well bowled, Harold," with Don Bradman standing next door to him, i.e., you're going to get it next.
Public furor created by Bodyline was such it made the implacable Douglas Jardine reconsider his strategy, if only momentarily.
After the third test at Adelaide, he did call a meeting of the players and suggest that they abandon Bodyline. Not so much in response to the accusation that it was unsportsmanlike, but because it was having such an effect on the crowd, and they feared that there might be a riot, and the obvious extent to which it was souring relations between the two countries. And they talked about it, but the general feeling, even among those who strongly disapproved of Bodyline, was that it would have looked like an acknowledgement that their tactics were unsportsmanlike, and that's what they couldn't bear to admit.
It was quite clear. He told us it had all been worked out and agreed with the MCC, that was the way the game was going to be played, and it was the only way to stop Bradman from getting runs, or might be the only way that they would stop him from getting runs. So I think he kept to what had been agreed and got all the blame, probably, for it.
What Jardine did encapsulates Test cricket. If you want to increase your chances of winning a Test series, you've got to try and disrupt the averages of the best players in the opposition. You know, batsmen, if you can bring them down, bowlers, if you can push them up. If you do that, you increase your chances of winning the Test series enormously. And that's what Jardine did. The other areas where Jardine was smart, he realised that fast bowling, the importance of fast bowling in Australia. So he brought a lot of good fast bowlers to Australia. And the third thing I'd say about Jardine is that if the administrators didn't want those field placings that he placed, then the administrators should have thought about that beforehand and put it in the laws. You see, what annoys me about not only Jardine's situation, but take my brother Greg's situation when he ordered the underarm. Whether you agree with what Jardine did, whether you agree with what Greg did, it was in the laws. So, but the problem that I have, it's always the players or the captains who get it in the neck, not the administrators who make the original blunder. So it really annoyed me that Jardine and Larwood in particular were castigated for what they did, when all they were doing was playing within the laws. So Jardine, I think, gets a most unfair rap. I think I didn't ever see the series, but just reading about it and being fascinated by it, and having had a grandfather, Victor Richardson, who played in that series, the series has always fascinated me, and I've always looked upon Jardine as a very, very smart captain.
I wanted 3 or 4 wickets to beat my state's record. So I got the first wicket down, and I must have been exerting myself a bit more, because I broke a bone in my foot. Well, it wasn't actually broke, it's something that's all there, all squeezed up. And I fell down and I got up and he said to me, he says, you'll have to finish the over, Harold. I said, I can't, Skipper. He says, you'll have to. I said, look, I can't walk or run about. He said, we'll have to finish the over. So I said, right, well, I said to the skipper, I said, right, I can go then now, can't you? He says, no. I said, can't go up. He says, no. I said, look, skipper, I said, I can't run, I can't hardly walk. He says, well, you've got to stop. It's a good cover point. Now, that, as you know, it's the worst position on the field. Where, I mean, you're running left, you're running right. So I said, I can't run after him. He said, all right, let somebody else run after him, and off he went. So I had to go to cover point. But Jardine told me afterwards, he said, I couldn't let you go up, Harold. He said, the psychological effect on Bradley, so I didn't want Don to know the seriousness of your injury. And that was the last ball I ever bowled in Australia. So I had to have an operation when I got back home.
It was supposed to be bottom line at us and ran down the middle of the wicket a bit. Douglas complained about him running on the wicket. That made him more angry and he bowled a bit quicker. I hadn't bowled 2 balls and he's had to go in front of the umpire, keep him off the wicket, you know, had to be straight away. But I had to admire him. In my book, he had it put in his blunt words. He had a ton of guts. I give him the works over in Sydney, even without the leg field. And I hit him a few times and he never flinched, you know. Hit him in the hand, there was blood running down his fingers and he never flinched. Then I dropped him like a light, got him in the groin. But you had to admire him for that, you know, he had a ton of it, what it took. And he was pretty ruthless and he was just determined to win the Ashes and that was it.
Jardine knew that the tide had turned against him really and resigned before it became an issue. Sent a note to the MCC saying that he had neither the time nor the inclination to play against Australia in 1934, and he reported the series from the press box.
My father did feel abandoned by the MCC, who had agreed that these would be the tactics for the Bodyline tour, and then left him to take the blame.
And we hope that he will do as they hope we will do, and return with the Ashes.
Douglas Jardine visited Australia on business in 1954. He was pleasantly surprised at the warmth of his reception and was delighted to strike up a friendship with Australia's cricket-loving Prime Minister, Sir Robert Menzies.
And there's a story of them at a dinner, and at the end, Sir Bob turning and saying that to my father that he thought he was probably the most unpopular man in Australia. My father very quickly correcting him and saying, on the contrary, that he reckoned that he was more unpopular still.
Most probably the most courageous captain that's ever gone 6,000 miles to play Australia cricket and come back with the Ashes.
We've just been round the world, and I think an exhibition such as this is what is wanted. In the way the Americans say, tell the world. There's nothing wrong with British sport.
Yeah.